Hey everyone, it's your boy Terry, coming to you from my spacious. Oh wait, cat! Oh, cat butt. Coming to you from the living room of stately O'Brien Manor. That's the tree. That's the one we don't trust. Anyway, gonna be a short video. So I'm gonna talk about a couple of books I'm in the process of reading. This is the one I'm in currently. Douglas Preston, Lincoln Child, Crimson Shore. In Exmouth, Massachusetts, wealthy artist's extensive wine collection is stolen in what looks like a robbery, but being a Preston Child Agent Pendergast novel, it of course goes much deeper than that. You can hear Henry behind that white door at the hoop on it playing Fortnite with his buddies, as he does for approximately 14 hours a day. There's Dad's chair, the green one. The ottoman part's stuck because the chair is broken. Almost everything you can see in here is broken in some capacity, especially the cat. Anyway, crime is committed. That crime, it turns out, was committed to cover up another crime. And it's not much of a spoiler to tell you that a body is found walled up inside the basement from which the wine collection was stolen. And then it ties into a missing ship from the 1840s. It involves some jewels, and there's a murder mystery. And that's all I'm going to say about it. I'm about halfway through. I'm pretty sure I think I know who did it. Also gets into the history of sort of the Wiccan witchcraft. I guess you'd call that a religion or belief system, set of mores, standards, and rules. Anyway, it's entertaining. I've read about 20 of these Agent Pendergast novels, and what I do is look, you can see my hand. I'm talking with my hands, even though I'm off camera. See the reflection there in the dust cover? I glom onto one author, and I kind of blow through all of their work, and your mind sort of gets reprogrammed. Look, I'm still scratching my head. See, always itchy during the videos. And I'll blast through all of that author's works, and your brain kind of gets rewired for that author's style. And it's just taken me a while to get unwired from Robert Crace and rewired to Preston Child. They're very good writers. They've let some political stuff sneak in that I don't love, but I try to avoid the politics here on this channel. A couple previous books, there was talk of the one percenters and this and that. Coming from a couple of fabulously rich authors, I kind of find a little rich, but that's just me. There is a beautiful, frosty Diet Ginger Lime Coke sitting right there waiting for me to crack it open. I might just crack it open during this video. I'll try not to burp this time, though. So I can recommend Crimson Shore. You kind of need to rewind a little bit and get into some earlier Preston Child Agent Pendergast novels, because by now, we're talking probably at least 15 books, and he's got a lot of history behind him now, just like Elvis Cole and Joe Pike. And I love the character of Agent Aloysius X.L. Pendergast. These books are enjoyable. Definitely worth picking up. They're a perfect beach read, or if you want to keep it in the reading room, knock out a chapter here, chapter there. They go pretty quick, and they're pretty lean, and always a solid story, solid mystery. And it's just taken me a while to get back into their writing. But fortunately, I have the next book lined up. Look at that, visual aids and everything. The Obsidian Chamber is the next book in the Agent Pendergast milieu. So I'm guessing he survives Crimson Shore long enough to enter the Obsidian Chamber. I called it the Obsidian something else last night. Anyway, by this time I should be pretty much... Come on, I can't work my camera. Pretty much rewired for Preston Child. And, I'm talking down to these guys, but I've read so many of their books. The Pendergast books and non-Pendergast books are all pretty enjoyable. Again, I think the only movie made from their extensive bibliography has been The Relic. And I'm speculating here, but I think the reason there's not more is because The Relic was such a gigantic mess that maybe they were disenchanted with the Hollywood system. And if you watched the Oscars the other night, I can pretty much see why. It's been a down year for movies last couple years. Aside from like the Marvel movies, which are all... the worst Marvel movie is a C+. you know. And now they're nominating movies that nobody sees. Look, see him scratching again. See my reflection going in my face, scratching again. Psychosomatic, I believe, along with my pre-Beatles shows sore throats I get before every Beatles show. Eyes still droopy, as you can see. I'm not sure. I can't see myself, but there we go. This is just my face. This is my face now. I have to live with that. So looking forward to finishing Crimson Shore, probably tonight or early tomorrow, and then digging into Preston and Child. I'm sorry, the sequel, Obsidian Chamber. I highly recommend the Preston and Child Agent Pendergast novels. When I get into this one, I'll give you a little bit more what it's about. I'm assuming it revolves around some sort of obsidian chamber, but I'm just guessing. Ta-da! The next book by guess who? Preston and Child. So they had the shiny dust covers on them because I got these all from our local library, as I like to say to annoy my children. Cat and foot reveal. Pretty high dollar famous footwear Nikes I got on there. They're in their third year. Preston Child Beyond the Ice Limit. This is actually a sequel to an earlier book that involved ice. As I said, not a very long video tonight. I read Ice Limit so long ago I cannot recall what it was about, but I know it was cold. I remember that. All right, take it easy. Take it easy. I'm going to feed you. Relax. I just cooked dinner, and it smells fabulous in here, so the cats are going crazy. I make a killer chicken tender. I get the Japanese, what are they called? All right. I'm getting to you. Come on, get your butt out of my face. Come on. There we go. I use the Japanese breadcrumbs. I put a little sea salt, little fresh ground pepper. See, I'm doing the fresh ground pepper movement in the background. Get your mind out of the gutters. And then a little garlic salt. Sometimes oregano, sometimes some onion flakes. But Catherine doesn't like onions, so I have to sneak those in when I can. But this book, if you can see right here, is a Gideon Crew novel. I believe there were only supposed to be 3 Gideon Crew books. This is at least the 4th that I'm aware of. Gideon Crew is another great Preston and Child character. He was born with what is eventually going to be a fatal aneurysm in his brain. So, as far as he knows, any moment on this earth could be his last. And he hooks up with this crew of guys that sort of just sent him on adventures. And the first 3, I know I enjoyed them all. I'm looking forward to reading this one. I think I may have read this one already, but I'm not sure. 2016? I can't recall. Anyway, I'm just showing you the books I have lined up to read. And I am a big Preston and Child fan, and I strongly recommend them. They get a little... they're violent, and they're murder mysteries, and there's weird stuff. But it's not like Stephen King levels of gore and the descriptions and all that. They're cracking good adventures, and I look forward to getting back into the Gideon Crew milieu. Milieu? Oeuvre. I know those words. I'm not sure I'm using them correctly. And again, probably sometime after the weekend, I'll be getting into this one. And I'll give you a quick little thumbnail review. But I am enjoying Crimson Shore. And that's our spider chair. You sit your butt down in there and sink down to the ground. And now, here, of course, is one of the greatest books ever committed to... It won't even stand up. Hold on, let me put Ice Limit back up here. That stands up pretty good. And see if I can lean this masterpiece against it. You've heard me talk about it a couple times on the channel. This is my book. This is Murder Okie, and it's not by Preston. It just looks that way. Murder Okie and Other Spooky Cape May Tales. I'll give you a quick rundown. In 2003, I began writing for Exit Zero magazine, owned and operated by Jack Wright. I'm sure if you've been in Cape May more than 3 minutes, you've seen an Exit Zero, you know what I'm talking about. I sent him a long email saying, hey, I think I could write a column for your magazine, and long story short, I started a column called The Undertow, and that became very popular very quickly. I was a full-time karaoke host at that time. So I was in a different bar or club 6 nights a week, and I just wrote about the people and places and the things that happened in a very sort of sarcastic, snarky, sort of bitchy kind of way, but always with meant with good humor. And in 2006, I believe, Jack asked me to write a serialized story for the magazine. I think it was an idea we'd kicked around a few times, but we committed to it in 2006, and that became dun 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 Murder Okie, which just happened to be about a full-time karaoke host named Terry O'Brien, whose karaoke singers started getting murdered at or before or after karaoke shows that he ran. And the hook of that story was everyone in Murder Okie is a real Cape May person, place, or thing, except for the character of the mayor. I want to be clear on that. The mayor, which is a sort of composite of your stereotypical, archetypical, sort of bumbling buffoon bureaucrat. Based on no one, I promise. Any ex or current or former mayors listen to this, which are probably zero, was not based on anyone, which is sort of a composite character to help move the plot along. But every other person, place, or thing in the story Murder Okie is an actual Cape May person, place, or thing. I think I've told you this before. People used to ask me to make fun of them in my Undertow column, and I knew I had hit on something successful with Murder Okie when they stopped asking me to make fun of them in my column and started asking me to kill them in my short story. And I had to tell them, no, sorry, I only need 6 or 7 victims, but I appreciate you asking. Maybe in the sequel. But if you've read the story, a sequel is going to be kind of hard to come by. But I'm kicking around ideas. And so this is the killer from the story Murder Okie. That was published 2006. It was 13 chapters, chapter a week. Took us basically from Memorial Day to Labor Day and was a pretty big hit. Hit the zeitgeist, as they like to say, a word I feel very pretentious using. But it struck a nerve, and people really liked it. And from like 2006 to 2010 or so, I was at the height of my powers as South Jersey's most popular karaoke host and newspaper columnist and short story writer and all this. It was a good time to be alive. That's when I met Anne Hathaway. She came to a karaoke show. And my story that summer, the main character was based on her. And not for any reason. She came, she sang. She's a good singer. Didn't talk a lot. But I did give her an autographed copy of the book. I think it said, "Thank you for tripling my business." Because as soon as word got out that Anne Hathaway was at Martini Beach, the place just got packed. And I sold a lot of karaoke t-shirts that night. Anyway, there are 4 other stories in this book. The next one, as you can see up here, that is a sleigh with sort of a jet engine. And you can see the sort of elf who is the pilot. And that's his little navigation system, the red deal. That story is called The Reindeer, the Elf, and the Attic Vent. I just finished rereading The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe series by C.S. Lewis, and I wanted the title to sort of reflect what I was into at that point. So Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe became The Reindeer, the Elf, and the Attic Vent. And the sort of gist of that story is an elf comes to deliver presents to a home which looks really suspiciously like mine. And the 3 young children, who at that time were, I think, 1, 3, and 5 years old, were wearing pajamas that said, "I've been a bad boy, return to Santa." Sort of a play on return to sender. And this elf had got a couple bottles in while he was flying around his sleigh and took those pajamas literally and takes the boys back to the North Pole. And the boys, of course, were modeled on my children, Owen, Jackson, and Henry. They were like Oliver, James, and Hank, something like that, all very thinly disguised versions. And that's an okay story. That ran about 4 or 5 chapters and really needed about 6 or 7, because the whole last chapter reads like a detailed outline of what the next few chapters should be. I'm relatively happy with that story. People that don't really point it out to me a lot when they talk to me about this book. But I give it a C. It's a C. I give Murder Okie a B+. I give Reindeer, the Elf, and the Attic Vent a C+. The book, by the way, actually got a B+ review in Philadelphia Magazine from Jen A. Miller, who is now a pretty big-time writer. She is, I don't want to say syndicated, but she writes for many different outlets, including the New York Times. So Jen A. Miller, she's a runner. She writes a lot about running. So there you go. Next is, what other stories are in here? I forget. There is, the 5 Stages of Death. I'm not sure that's reflected in here. That's a story set in the world of theater. Does that have something to do with the lighthouse? It might have something to do with the light. I think maybe the climax of that story. Hold on, getting a phone call from my best friend. His name is Potential Spam. My second best friend is restricted. So there's 55 missed calls a day from my two best friends, potential spam and restricted. Short video, we're already pushing the 20-minute mark. So I think the lighthouse played a part in Five Stages of Death, but I don't remember. Anyway, that story is set in the world of theater, loosely based on Cape May Stage and a fictionalized version of Cape May Stage and a fictionalized version of Elaine's. I wasn't getting along with Elaine's at that time, so they may not be as well reflected in there as they would have been if I was working there and still working there. But again, nothing was based on anyone. I just used those two sort of landmarks to build the story around. I kind of like that story. Local legend John Alvarez was the basis for a character in there, and it's just a little murder mystery, evil twins, mistaken identity, that kind of thing. That's a lot of fun. And the Five Stages of Death, of course, is based on the Five Stages of Grief, and there you go. That's just a fun little adventure story. Also in here is the Celestial. I'm not sure that's reflected on this cover either. The idea of the cover was to have something from every story as part of the cover. This is the killer from Murder Oki. That's the slave from Attic Vent. I think the moon. That's definitely the moon. That's definitely a lighthouse. The lighthouse ties into this guy, who we'll get into in a minute. But the next story was the Celestial. Again, it's set in a dinner theater, and that's kind of a supernatural, almost spiritual kind of story for me. It's one that people really liked. Of all the feedback I've gotten on this book, that's a story that people single out and say, "Oh, I really, really enjoyed that story." As did I. Enjoyed writing it. I can't really say anything else aside that's not a spoiler. But people seem to really like that one. But the one I get the most comments on is about this guy right here. And that story is called... Oh my gosh, I forget. What is that story called? That story is called... Let's see. Hold on. Murder Oki out of Spooky Cape May Tales. Welcome. Oh, right there it says, For Kath. Isn't that nice? There's the introduction from Jack Wright. Murder Oki, the Celestial, Five Stages of Death, the Reindeer, the Elf, and the Attic Vent, and the Jetty. That's what that one's called. I forgot. The Jetty, we did 4 of my previously published stories for the book, and we wanted to do a 5th one, kind of like when Billy Joel made his greatest hits. He put 2 or 3 new songs on the greatest hits album, so you had to buy the greatest hits album to complete your Billy Joel song collection. So we wanted to put a story in here that would give people an impetus to buy the book, even if they've already read the other stories, and that turned out to be the Jetty. That was a story I had been kicking around since my early 20s. My days as a college-aged landscaper. Guy discovers a thing in the woods and unspools from there. I just transferred that story down to the beach. And this gentleman right here is contemplating the end of his life. At the end of the jetty, in my mind's eye, when writing it, it was the jetty that was outside of Henry's on the Beach, which was down on Gurney, across from, not Gurney, the one before Gurney, the one across from the old movie theater, Louis Pizza. That's in your mind's eye, if you've read that story, that's where I was writing it. And it's just sort of a sentimental, a guy who's just sort of looking back on his youth and things that went right and things that did not go right, as he contemplates the end of his life here at the end of the jetty. And I honestly don't remember how it ends, or I might even tell you. One of the things I'm most proud of about this book is on the back page here, you get your standard, read this book, it's great, here's this and that. I got 2 blurbs. This first one, let me get a little closer here so I can read it, says, I took Terry O'Brien on a field trip when he was 8. The little brat ate my potato chips and gave Ed Beaster a fat lip. That trip lives in my memory still, the way New Jersey lives in these stories, in haunting, hilarious, sentimental, and savagely true-to-life detail. That was written by Dave Stern. Dave Stern is a gentleman whose Beatles show I went up to just a couple weeks ago. Dave is the New York Times best-selling author of The Blair Witch Project, a Dossier. I mentioned before, he wrote the companion book to the Blair Witch Project film that did very, very well, and we're all very proud of Dave. I'm sure he was quite pleased that it did well. And even though Dave Stern is a good feather in your cap to get, my crowning moment is that there is a quote on here. It says, Terrence O'Brien has found every story that can possibly be squeezed out of his simultaneously wicked and sentimental imagination. He has promised me that if I will recommend his book to others and it sells at least 1 million copies, he will never write another. Please help me achieve this noble goal. Buy this book. New York Times, that is from Orson Scott Card, the New York Times bestselling author of the Nebula Award-winning Ender's Game. Ender's Game is one of those things, if you've known me for more than 10 minutes, you know Ender's Game is one of the seminal books of my life because it's a phenomenal book, and at the time I read it, I was kind of a wandering youth. Look at that, talking about nothing, and we're at 21 minutes. And just real quick, I had developed a kind of relationship with the webmaster of Orson Scott Card's website, which is hatrack.com. Spells like it sounds, like put your hat on a rack, it's a hat rack. Hatrack.com. I'd exchanged some emails with his webmaster, and when the book was coming out, I sent his webmaster, I forget the lady's name, but she was great. I had sort of established a sort of pen pal relationship with her. We'd exchange emails every few weeks, just, hey, how you doing, what's going on? And I said, hey, I had this book coming out. I wonder if I could get a blurb from Orson. In fact, I even wrote the blurbs for him. One was, I don't know Terry, I've never read his work, but here's his book. And I forget what the other one was. And I did not get an email back from his webmaster. I got an email back from Orson Scott Card himself saying, Terry, send me your 2 best stories. I will read them, and I will decide if I want to write a blurb for you or not. And my first reaction was, holy, Orson Scott Card wants to read my stories. And my immediate second reaction was, oh, bleep, Orson Scott Card wants to read my stories. I went from, in whiplash-like fashion, from being absolutely thrilled and overjoyed to being completely paralyzed with fear and panic that my favorite author and a brilliant writer in his own right wanted to read my material. So I sent him the material, he read it, and he wrote that blurb for me, and I think it's really, really funny, and it perfectly fits the tone of the book. A little bratty, little sarcastic, little, tongue-in-cheek. And as you can see here, that little red sticker-ish thing, I did something to the camera now that it doesn't want to focus. It says soon-to-be a major motion picture, or soon-to-be a motion picture. Usually those little things on the book say soon to be a major motion picture. I wanted to put soon to be a minor motion picture, so we compromised on soon to be a motion picture, which this book came out in 2008, so the soon part is kind of out the window. But yes, there is a small local production company that technically owns the film rights to Murder Okie. I wrote about 6 drafts of that script. There was a little bit of movement on it about 8-9 years ago. But it has gone nowhere since. And so if anybody out there wants to buy the film rights, they're pretty cheap. I got about 18 short stories out there. Again, I'm looking to get them in front of the eyes of people who can turn them into feature films, short form television series like a la Netflix. But you're all aware of that. And that's where the Patreon comes in for the TKO productions that me and a couple of partners are trying to get off the ground here. So that's it. I just want to talk about some books. Give you the rundown on my book if you hadn't read it. There's no more. I don't have any more physical copies left. But if you go to Google or Amazon or eBay, you can literally get my book for a penny, and then it's like $4.99 for shipping. It's also in all of the local Cape May County libraries. That's where I sold my first 50 sales were to all the local Cape May County library branches. So there you go. It was only a 3,000 print run, which just ran out at the tail end of 2017. And, it's not a lot, but I'd like to tell myself there's a lot of guys out there that have sold 0 books. So there you go. My very short, now 25-minute video talking about books I'm reading and have written. I do want to say thank you to my big brother Mike, the latest patron to my Patreon, with the big fat monthly donation, which is deeply, deeply appreciated. And now only 50% of my 4 patrons are direct family members. I'm looking to take that up to 75, 80%, whoever wants to dive in there. Again, subscribe, recommend it to your friends. You can share it on the Facebook if you want. We're at 34 subscribers and 44 hours consumed, and then we need 1,000 and 4,000. So any share, any subscription, even if your friends who don't want to watch the videos, just ask them to subscribe so we get that subscriber base up. And I think the consumed hours will take care of itself. Anyway, that's it. Now I'm rambling. I'm over time. Click on my About page. My email's on there, my Facebook, my Twitter, and the Patreon. If you got $1 a month, I will take $1 a month. Until next time, be good. Misty, yeah, we're talking to you. Say goodnight. Say goodnight, Misty. Be good. Oh, good cat.